So without further ado, I would like to welcome Colin to talk a little bit to us about advertising effectiveness, and he's here uh, today. Actually, going to talk about a case study from the Effie Awards, and I'll hand it over to you, Colin. I know that you want me to show stuff for you, so just let me know when and what.
Yes, I've been experimenting, and I think I might be able to bring the case up and share it myself, which would mean I could scroll it myself. But we'll have a test, and if it doesn't work, I'll leave it to you. So because I haven't
Right.
done that
Yeah.
before. But yeah, okay. Well, thank you, and thanks for the invitation. It's good to talk to you, and good to talk to students of advertising, the future. I represent the past, and it's very nice to be able to talk to people who will be the future. So welcome. The I think anybody who wants a future in advertising should love the pursuit of creativity. I mean, that's the kind of the draw card for being in advertising, should really be the creative side. Whether you're a creative person yourself, a strategy planner helping guide the creative, or whether you're account management person or whatever role you have. I mean, the hero is the creative work. I think we should all want to produce work that gets noticed, people talk about, people enjoy or are interested by. But it's not actually what the business is really about. It is what's celebrated. But the most important question in advertising is, did it work? This is a commercial business. We're not artists, although many people may be artists in advertising, but it's about commerce, and therefore, did it work? And there are many creative awards schemes around, because the creative people love winning creative awards. Go to agencies and you'll see them all over their foyers there, and the creative people collecting them, which I think is terrific, because it celebrates and develops the craft of advertising. And we're all nothing without the creative people, without the creators. We're all out of a job. So, but there's only one award scheme that's focused on results, and that is the Effies, which is an international award scheme that exists in 48 countries, headquartered in the US. And I've been chair of the Australian judging since inception here 12 years ago. So it's in that capacity that I'm talking to you today. Next week, we'll be announcing the 2020 winners, and there will be 5 gold Effies announced. I shouldn't really tell you that, but I can. I can't tell you who they are, but there'll be 5. Five from almost 200 entries. So you can see from that, it's keenly contested. We get typically 200 is about what we get every year. And 5 golds, 30 awards in total is pretty common. It's funny how it seems to come out at pretty much. Actually, last year we had 9 golds, which was high. It's only 5 this year, and I'll explain how tough it is to actually to get one. The entries have to prepare a written paper, which is usually about 10 pages. I think 10 pages is actually the maximum. I forget, but I don't write them. I read them and help judge them, and they write a written paper answering 10 questions, which are scored out of a total 100 points. And to win a gold, or indeed any award, an entry has to survive 3 rounds of judging. In the first one, we have 160 judges reading everything, six reads for every case. And these are all people who hold senior positions in agencies, sometimes clients, management consultants, media people, but all have to have, they can come from different disciplines within agency life, but they're all, a lot of CEOs of agencies read them. They kind of like to see what other people are doing. So, and then we actually draw a line and we cut them. Usually 40% go through, 90 or something like that will go through to the next round. And funny, it's consistent. There's a mark, there's a benchmark, a number that's been printed in my head, and it nearly always comes out within a point or so of the same thing. Well, I can't actually tell you, it's 72%. So of all these people, when they've rated them, you've got to be over 70 to be a chance of going through to the next round. Next time we do the same thing again, of those that are left, but we do it with, this time, they're all senior marketers. No agency people, because people think they might be biased. It's a very competitive industry. So there are no agency people in the next round. They're all, well, mostly from the client side, but some strategy consultants and people like that as well. Occasionally, one or two academics as well. Academics are good. So if you guys are interested, those of you, then you'd be most welcome. We probably don't have enough dialogue with academia in that sense, but we like to involve them as well, because it's just a different perspective people bring on the cases. And then we have one more round beyond that, where the panel, there are panels for this round. So we have 8 panels of 6. They get together and they judge a whole category, and they nominate what they would think it should get as an award. But then we have another round where the team leaders of these panels get together. And we do that because sometimes cases are entered in multiple categories. And if it did well in one and was nominated for gold in one and nothing in another, you want to discuss it. There may be a good reason for it, but maybe it was a tough jury or a easy jury or whatever. So we hammer this out, which is a fascinating discussion where we argue and debate, and things that might have started off gold end up with nothing, and something else that was low gets elevated. And that's how we end up with this. And we pick the grand Effie winner, which is, the best in show. So that's how the process works. And as you're working on a case for Suzuki, Nicholas and I thought it would be a good idea to try and take you through a case that's kind of related in the same industry. And there's a very good case from 2018 for Mitsubishi that won gold. And so I thought, well, we'll go back and we'll pick on that case. Incidentally, it's been entered as a long-term case in the 2020 awards. So next Friday, when the awards are announced, you'll be able to go and see whether it actually won an award again. And if it did, so see, Colin, if it did, you can actually see what happened in the 3 years since the case that I'm going to take you through. So you can actually read all the Effie winners on the Ad Council website. There's a sort of sub-Effie's case. And that's a great, I don't know if you lecturers use it, but it's probably the best body of work in terms of case studies that exists. Unfortunately, some of the information, particularly on return on investment, is redacted from them. We give people that. It's there when the judges view it, but when it's published, they ask us to take that off. But anyway, so I'm going to take you quickly through the case and what the judges thought. But before we do that, I thought it'd be a good idea to look at the brand television commercial that kind of held the whole campaign together. So this is where you come in, Nicholas, if you can actually play it.
I don't get what's wrong with being different, just to be different. We're living out the back of the car. We're living out the back of the car.
Mitsubishi SUV, built for the time of your life.
Well, that commercial is not going to win any creative awards. I don't believe it has. I wouldn't expect that it would. But I think it rises above most car advertising. I mean, it's got all the generic car advertising cues, lots of shots of people having a good time and lots of shots of cars and that sort of thing, which is pretty standard for the generic car commercials, quite frankly. I guess they do that because it works, but it does show the sort of generic functional aspects of an SUV. So it does that, but it also unlocks, I think, the sort of much deeper emotions of family life and what an SUV actually means and what you can do with it, whether people do that or not. Most of them just drive around in the traffic, of course, but that you can actually, this notion of escape and fun-filled times and that sort of thing. So it's got all that, and it's got a really high energy music track to it, which I think which is quite quite memorable. And a little cues that I like. I actually was talking to the agency principal, asking if I could get a copy of it because I couldn't find it on YouTube. And I said, oh, yeah, the original brand commercial, the one with the little kid in the back who puts her tongue out, kind of thing. So there are little things like that in advertising often do add to memory and recall.
I think the tune's marvelous. That rings in my ears.
It's a great upbeat kind of happy sort of song, isn't it? And the proposition that's there, built for the time of your life, which is the kind of essence of the campaign that they launched. Now this commercial is only one part of a lot of what they did, but you just see it on television and you kind of think, oh, that's quite nice. You don't really think of, why did they do this? What took them there? Did it work? Where's it going? And it's that I'm going to talk about. Did it work? Well, obviously it did work, or it convinced a panel of judges that it worked, which is how it got gold. But we'll talk about that. Okay, so these are the cases, and this is exactly as you'd see it if you go to the website, the Ad Council website. So general entry form here, and we don't worry about any of this. This is all about eligibility and rules and formatting and all that kind of stuff. A little executive summary, Mitsubishi moved from number 6 to number 3 in a little over 12 months without much more spend or product innovation against much bigger marketers. So that's the story here, how they did it. We asked them just how much money they spent on it. We don't judge that. But if you're judging, you kind of want to know if it's they spent $30,000 or 80 million on it. And this is a big campaign. 20 to 40 million. It's this is a big client spending a lot of money. So the next question that we asked them is, what was the strategic communications challenge? That's the first thing. What was going on when you actually did this? And they talk about here about the fact that Mitsubishi was a different brand. There were old Sigmas and Magnas and things like that around, but it had a very low awareness. It wasn't a prestige brand at all. They say, I don't know why that data is not there, but no reason for buying beyond price. But they thought that there was no particular benefit that they actually had. And a sea of SUV sameness, they're saying. So lots of brands selling cars, they all look pretty much the same. The one thing was that the categories, small, medium, and large, these were all large, had kind of flattened out, but the categories were growing. And I think anybody knows that, and we've seen that happen. This is back in from 2011 to 2015, but that's continued to go, and the small segments kept going. So the great thing they had is they had cars. They actually had 3 cars in a category that was growing, but they had no image for it whatsoever. So they talk here about the competition, Mazda, Hyundai, as leaders of that. They talk about the fact that they then had 3 cars though. They had a small one, they had a medium one, and they had a large one. Now, whether that was brilliant planning from the Mitsubishi factory back in Germany, or and we're ahead of the game, or whether that was just kind of how it fell out, they would say they were number 6 in the market, but they had this range of 3 products. So, obviously they thought that they needed to start investing in their master brand, carrying this position through their products, retail sales events to bring it all together. They'd forget about, although they still sold 2-wheel drive saloons, sedans, Lancer and Mirage, that they'd kind of forget about those. They'd just sell them if anybody asked for them, put them on the yard, but they would actually concentrate on the 4-wheel drive, the SUV range. Actually, I don't know if they are all 4-wheel drive, but they're all SUVs, not all. So that's the first thing we do, and they've described the situation that they experienced, the agency and the company was experiencing. Then we ask, what were your objectives? What were you trying to do? And it says state-specific goals. when we're judging these things, we hate things like to grow market share or to or increase sales, or we want numbers, and that should always be the case when you're doing a campaign. Otherwise you'll never know whether you got there or not. I mean, set a number, and that's what you should be judging it against. So they talk here about they had a business objective. The business objective was to beat the category, essentially. And to beat the category, that meant they wanted to grow sales by, on the smallest vehicle, 7.5%, on the medium one, 13%, and on the large one, 6%. I'm not quite sure of the reasons why those three were different. They don't actually explain that, but yeah, there would have been reasons for that. Certainly with the larger one, I guess the market was the slowest growth. It was almost flat. So that would probably explain the lower one for Pajero Sport. ASX, I think, one of them was a fairly new vehicle as well, I think, the ASX. Then they actually set down, that's the business objectives. Now, what's the advertising trying to do? They set down here behavior objectives. So they actually want people to do something. That's pretty sensible. And in terms of advertising, what can you actually measure? What can you get people to do? Well, you can get them to visit the website, which is part of the buying process. So the buying journey. So they had a target there to increase the website traffic by 10%. To me, that sounds quite modest. I don't know, what they did. That sounds quite a modest increase. And to increase lead numbers. So from the website, you could go and request a test drive. So they wanted to increase that by, or a brochure, or to do something tangible. So they wanted to increase that by 10%. And then they had advertising, that's a behavioral role, but there's also an attitudinal role for the advertising here. They wanted to change people's perceptions. And they wanted to increase, this is obviously they've got some kind of monitor going on here, a quantitative monitor, and they wanted to increase brand consideration and intention to buy for all those, and to raise brand consideration for the overall brand. So that was so that's what they're trying to achieve. And then we say, well, what was your strategy? And how did you get there? So the first thing about the strategy, they said, and this is not incredible. Sometimes you get things you think, gee, that's really clever. Fancy doing that. I mean, this is not really clever. It's really almost obvious. They're going to focus on SUVs, and they did some research that discovered that there's lots of emotional cues and things like that emotional triggers that you can actually turn on for SUVs that people weren't really doing. So apart from the functional things of space, flexibility, safety, and all that kind of thing, sitting above everybody else. So there's all those things, but it's the emotional appeal that seems to explain their success in Australia. And one of the interesting things they also realized is that of their competitors sell lots of other things. Toyota, Hyundai, Honda, Mazda. They sell SUVs, but they sell lots of other things as well. So it's really impossible for them to develop an image or a reputation as being the SUV people. I suppose Range Rover can do that at the very top end of the market, but that's not the same as this. So they saw that as being an opportunity for them, and to Mitsubishi, the people's SUV expert. So they thought that they could actually sort of be the expert, and they thought they had reasonable credentials. They had four-wheel drives for quite a long time. They had a great rally success a long time ago. And they'd always had a reputation for being quite strong, unexciting, but strong. So they kind of felt that the heritage of the brand kind of fitted that position reasonably well, even if it was largely forgotten. Yeah, they won the Dakar Rally 12 times. Well, that's, if anybody's ever seen the Dakar Rally, I mean, winning it once would be a miracle. But so they got some good. If you were probing, then you could actually say then it was a kind of believable claim.
Sounds like the Volvo of Japan.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I guess that's probably right. I mean, yeah. Yeah, good point. So and they did a lot of research on the in terms of life stages, and they saw that they got this advantage too of starting small, middle size, then the large one, so they could actually track a family. Ideally, I mean, you could follow them, you know, get them in the smallest car, and follow them all the way through the whole life of it. But whether they've done that, I'm not sure. The long-term case might show that, but yeah, that's probably even early to know that. But it'd be interesting to think that you could actually upgrade from the ASX, the smallest one, to the Outlander, and then onto the Pajero. They wanted people. When you read these things, you'll find that. Almost all entrants have discovered that quoting various people always works well with the judges, or they think it does. So Barr and Sharp gets quoted quite often, and some guys who've Peter Field from the UK, who's done a lot of work in studying advertising effectiveness. Here we've got Daniel Kahneman, you know, from Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, who's they're quoting here. But it's just, I suppose I think it makes them look more intelligent. But anyway, they said we want to get people feeling about the brand rather than just rationalizing. And they want to we want them to feel happy. I know you can see that in the commercial that we've just seen. We want strength to come through. So hence this, the previous campaign was better built, better backed. So they want to kind of carry on with that. And they also had this, you know, we have some of the best times of our life in the car. So there's this theme they took out of it. So that was the sort of strategy they adopted there. And then we went on to say, okay, well, what did you do, right? Now, we're not judging creativity here. So the judges don't see any visual stuff. They don't see commercials, just as you have, but they still want to know what they've actually done. So we say, well, what was the big idea? What was it that drove the effort? And they said, this line, it's not an advertising line, but Mitsubishi SUVs enable lasting good times at every stage of life. So that's the proposition in a nutshell. We then asked them how they brought it to life. So here they're actually showing us the work. I mean, there's a whole mass of stuff. What you see is just beyond the commercial, you'll see that there was a brand campaign, retail campaigns, multimedia, multi-channels here. I'll kind of, in fact, if I go to wherever it is here, so all this stuff here, but it all has this kind of this common theme, and the brand commercial, and running through, built for the time of your life, you know, running through into posters, retail work, onto digital. They show, I mean, big client. You can see how they spend 20 to 40 million here. There's, I mean, it runs through everything they do, and it runs through all the models that they're doing too, in a different way. You know, one's built for outdoors, and one's built for the city, but same kind of thing. And this is sale stuff, end of year sale. So it all has a sort of common, and the time of your life starts now, call to action on the sales stuff. So it's all got a common thread through all the work from the brand television commercial right down to the retail stuff here, which is like it's not easy to build campaigns that have that level of flexibility. And you kind of look at the work that the agency's done here. I mean, that's a huge body of work. So then we get to the important bit. Now we understand what they did and why, but the most important bit, we say here, questions 7 and 8, the outcome, 40 points here, go to this part, is this is what the F's are all about, the results, you know. And so the first question on that, we are number 7, is how do you know your campaign was successful, or perhaps more, it would be more appropriate to say, how can you convince us that your campaign was successful? So the first thing here is you need to go back to the objectives for that. This is where the objectives come in. You know, did they do what they said they would do? And in this one here, they talk about on the left here, the category. Category, the small ones declined, and so did the large, but the medium SUVs grew quite rapidly. And they talk about their own performance, 7.7% growth for the little one, and becoming the number one small SUV. 25% category, 25% for the Outlander, and huge growth for the Pajero Sport, 23% growth. Now, if I'm the judge on this, I'm just slightly irritated by the fact that they haven't reminded me here what the objectives were. I mean, I like the comparison with the category, but I have to go back to where they said the objectives were earlier to find out whether they've beaten it or not. So I think they could have had another column here that said what they were trying to achieve. But there were actually, the numbers that they quoted earlier were 7.5% for the small category. So they made that. 13.6 was their objective in the Outlander. So they did extremely well in that, almost double. And 6.2% growth for the Pajero Sport. So did phenomenally well in that. So, I mean, I think they actually suffered a bit by not helping the judges by reminding them of what they were actually trying to achieve. And then they show the sales, 12 months sales graph, and looks pretty good. It's sort of the arrows are going in the direction that everybody would want. So sales are, excellent. What they show here, a change in volume sales. They're going back to the category again. The behavioral stuff, unfortunately, the results have been removed here. And so the judges would have seen it, but the website traffic and the lead numbers, those targets there, I don't know what the results actually were. But the judges say they did really well, so it was obviously a lot better than that. But we'll come to that.
They're spending money on around 9 News, so they must have been spending big.
Yeah, right. Yeah, indeed. And then on the attitudinal front, they interestingly, the agency did their own qualitative research here. A lot of clients would prefer that they did it independently, but of course the agency will probably do it more cheaply. But you might sometimes question the independence of judging the outcome of your own work. But I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with this. But so they did that. They did neuro insight tests. Now I'm sure you people know much more about that than I do. Test long-term memory encoding performance. So it's a reasonably sophisticated tool to be using for that. And they show that consideration and intention to buy, which were the emotional outcomes from the advertising they were after, they got pretty massive increases here. I mean, those look like very, very healthy numbers from the campaign there in terms of consideration and intention to purchase. So I mean those are very strong numbers. And if you look at brand consideration, intention to buy, that's from the year before. So blue is the year before, green is the campaign period. Brand consideration for the brand from minus 24 to plus 28. The brand consideration for New South Wales minus 43 to plus 221, and then intention to buy minus 25 plus. I mean, they're huge increases.
That's phenomenal data.
So they show here, and I think I'm a bit sort of cynical about this stuff. They show the back of the car song has become a distinctive asset for the brand. Google Trends show Mitsubishi ad song spikes as a search term alongside key campaign exposure terms. I sort of say, well, Now that's nice, isn't it? You might say that's kind of it's sort of anecdotal support, but it's not about sales. It's not really what they said to do. I mean, you could like the song and hate the commercial, or like the song and think the car's rubbish. So I don't pay a lot of attention to that. And then they
Yeah, but it does tie to awareness, though, doesn't it?
yeah, it does. It does. It does. And they quote a couple of social responses, but since there are only two, and there must have been hundreds, but I don't think the judges would spend a lot of time really worrying about that. It doesn't hurt, but quite frankly, I always like it when the managing director or says this was phenomenally successful. I don't pay any attention when the marketing the manager says it, because he wants people to think that. But when the MD or somewhere says it, or things like when they've actually campaigns have been used internationally as well, and you kind of say, well, that must be a test of success if they go and pick it up and run it in another market somewhere. But they don't have that here. And then they show here the I mentioned that Peter Field, Les Binet and Peter Field, from the English guys who study the IPA, Effectiveness Awards database, to look at trends and learnings from that. And actually they're doing that here in Australia now with a guy by the name of Rob Britton, who's actually working on using the data that's captured in all the information that we've got to see if you can plot to trends and lessons for marketing. But so the campaign begins here, and we see the long-term effects there. When I looked at this, I thought, well, this is 12-month rolling market share. But I look and I say, oh, but this growth started quite a long time before the campaign started. So, and I would have liked them to explain why. It may have been new product launches or something like that, but I would like to know what was going on down here before the campaign started. But nonetheless, it seems to be this. Certainly, there's a good healthy upward trend going on there. And they've moved, as I said earlier, they've moved from 6 to number 3, overtaking Holden, Ford, and Hyundai. This is 2018, remember. And within SUVs, Mitsubishi moved from 4 to 2. The next question we asked them is, did it achieve a positive ROI? This is often highly contentious among entrants and judges. Difficult for entrants because to start with, I'd say 50% of advertising agencies and probably about 30% of client marketing people don't actually know how to measure return on investment. You can do it in different ways. In the FEs, this is why we actually have here, because people kept doing it in different ways. We said, no, that isn't ROI. So we've spelt out what we mean by it. And we mean increased profit. So increased using the profit margin, sales times the profit margin, less the expenses of the campaign. And that being how we define. So we say if the incremental gross profit is $1,000 and the campaign costs are $1,000, they cancel it out and the ROI is 0. But so we try and do that. People still get it wrong. And the other problem is clients often don't like to reveal this information. Which I understand, but so we say, oh, well, listen, if you can't get it, why don't you use things like, industry standard margins? I mean, the car category, for example, must have a sort of standard profit margin. I don't know what it is, but all categories have a kind of standard margin. So use the standard margin. We'll accept that. What we want to know, though, is that you didn't spend 40 million on advertising and got $5 million worth of profit out of it. That's what we're trying to, because that's what we're trying to get rid of. Anyway, so we do this here, and you'll see it with many of the cases, unfortunately, that it's been removed. So there is no data there for us to know that. Some clients do allow it. Some categories, government, for example, love people to know that they spent the money wisely. So they usually put all that in. Although when you're measuring a social campaign, well, I won't touch on that now because it's a whole other issue. I mean, there are different ways in which you measure social outcome from a commercial outcome like this one.
Colin, from memory, because you would have seen the original, I assume that it was positive.
Yes, and you'll see from the judge's comments here that it is. And I can't remember it. I remember reading this case, and I always go. I go through. I can't read all of them. I go through sort of the top 30 or 40 or something like that, and certainly through all the award winners. And I write for myself just a note of whether I think it's gold, silver, bronze, or nothing, which just helps me when I'm chairing the judging panels, just to have a kind of frame of reference in my mind, and particularly to interrogate them, to make, so you got to convince me as well, sort of thing, even though I don't score. I'm a non-scoring chairman by choice, because I get lots of flack from agencies who think they should have won, who don't. And it's much easier to say, listen, I'm only the carrier of tidings. I run the process, but I don't score. So anyway, they said the last thing that we asked them to do, though, is convince us the result wasn't due to other factors. Typically, there are other factors going on. I mean, advertising doesn't work alone. It's very rare that it's only the advertising. There are other things going on in the marketplace. So they said there were no additional sales events other than what's normally done, end of year sale and that sort of thing. They had no new product launches, only minor model specification changes. They contrasting our competitors had launched some new vehicles. And pricing remained consistent. There was no significant change between pricing. They could have indexed pricing here. Some people do in some categories. They haven't done here, and we didn't grow in sales and revenue just before the category grow. They say because we outgrew the categories, which they've explained. And following the same fate as Mitsubishi in 2004, Ford shut its local manufacturing in 2016, which we remembered, but that probably didn't have a big effect. It might have done. I've got a Ford Territory, which was one of the last of those, and I think that was in 2016. So that would have gone out of the market, but other things would have come in. So we sort of say out of that, well, there's nothing very big going on that might be a condition. In some categories, you say, look, I need to know what the weather was. For example, if you're talking about selling ice cream or something like that, I really need to know what the weather conditions might have been in that year, or whether floods or storms, or COVID, of course, had a massive impact on many categories and has made it'll make it for next year certainly really quite difficult trying to judge. I mean, many things that would have been great campaigns have failed totally. I mean, I've seen a case, for example, for Tourism Tasmania, which I think it's a really good campaign, and the agency deserved to win for it to be very successful. And of course, it was pulled. It would have had to be pulled because you can't go there anyway. So there are a lot of stories like that, and obviously, well, Victoria and Queensland have certainly got their own problems there, a bit less so here in New South Wales. But then finally, we ask about the overall story here. We just ask them to sort of give them, what can we learn from this? What would be useful? What would be useful for Megan and other students to learn from this campaign, or indeed the lecturers as well? So they say here, just in a nutshell here, retail brands need big emotional ideas too. And they've certainly shown that here. Brand and retail can come to life under one idea with the same quality, and they've demonstrated that through their work there. To move big audiences, we need broad-reaching emotive channels, and that's something Barr and Sharp certainly talked strongly about that, about mental awareness, and which comes from large-reaching emotive channels. They talk about the power of music here, which is pretty evident. And they say, don't be afraid to own the category feeling, because that's how you can dismiss this case and say, yeah, but it's an SEO. That's all they've done. But they've tried to do that. Sometimes you do something completely different. If you look at, say, the famous Canadian club campaign, over beer. That was a campaign, a long-running campaign, and a gold winner in the Effies as well. That's actually taken a totally different approach to the category by lining itself up against another category. That was and still is a really innovative, radical strategy to take. This one isn't. It's not a radical strategy, but don't be afraid to do it.
Brave
So,
one against beer drinkers.
pardon?
It's a brave one against beer drinkers.
Yeah, well, it seems to have worked for them too. So
Oh,
I'm going to pull out of this and stop sharing if I may. Unless, I'm going to stop sharing it now. And I go back to give you some what the judges said, right? I mean, I've kind of commented as I've gone along, but I think that's quite helpful. And in the three parts, in the first question 2 to 4, which were the objectives and strategy and what did you do part of it, or the objectives and strategy, sorry, part of it. Here's 3 comments here. Well thought through and articulated. Mitsu was in a world of hurt, and the strategy created, whilst not completely breakthrough or disruptive, was built on fundamental truths and importantly tapped into owning the category feeling. Another one, clear and logical setup of context and challenge. A strong strategy that was bold to push emotion and longer term branding in the face of declining sales. Yeah, that's a good point, that too. Rather than just concentrate on short-term sales to get them out of trouble, they were trying to build a brand for the long term as well. So great writing, easily telling a compelling narrative on context, ambition, opportunity, insight, and strategy. A little more context behind the prior year's objectives would have been helpful. And that's a fair comment, I think. And then against question 5 and 6, which was what did you do, the campaign. Nice idea that captured feeling of SUV and unlocked deeper emotions related to family memories with a powerful music track. A strong platform that did a lot of heavy lifting across channels and well thought out media strategy. So tick there. And then I've got more on the results here. That's ultimately this is about the results. Outstanding results, a campaign that's truly reinvented Mitsubishi in Australia. Evidence of strong sales and growth, ROI beyond expectations. Hence your comment there, so it was. Longer term sale increase, a good sign that the platform is resonating and rebonding with customer segments. Somebody here who had the same problem I had. It's unfortunate that the rolling MS data might suggest the brand had been steadily gaining share since 2014, as this undermines the case that campaign was especially or disproportionately impactful. Fortunately, supporting brand consideration intent metrics combined with lead generation data helps. So, I think that's a fair criticism. I think if more people had actually said that, it could have ended up with a silver and not a gold, I think, because it's not faultless on that point. There may be reasons for it, but they haven't explained them to us. So there are a lot of themes in this case that many other marketers will benefit from, especially role of emotion in decision making, not being shy to take and own a category generic, connecting the brand and retail messages within a campaign. Very interesting case. Another one here, well written and showcasing the power of a simple, emotionally driven category leadership position for a brand that had lost relevancy. Enjoyed the case, strong story that linked logically from context, objective, strategy, idea, and results. A very good paper, well structured and argued. The creative idea and execution are good, not great, but the strategy is strong and the results are fantastic. Well done. So outstanding, an outstandingly effective brand rejuvenation story. I've just got 3 more. Very robust paper, utterly convinced that the campaign contributed to the effectiveness of the efficiency rate as stated in the ROI. Consideration of other factors covered all possible bases convincingly. A strong paper and well written. Love it. So energizing to see a submission based on taking a brand that is performing badly in an extremely competitive market and achieve outstanding results on a big idea with an emotive execution. And lastly, great strategy and engaging creative. Music always felt a staple of car ads, but in this case, it did work exceptionally hard and was a great choice. Results were very well articulated and supported by data. An excellent submission. So that's the case there. And I think writing your Suzuki case, you kind of say that's that's what a great case in car advertising should look like. Questions?
I think it's really interesting because they were lower down in the category and they lifted significantly, and Suzuki's even lower. You know what I mean? In a way, it's a similar problem, but they're at a lower level. But they've got the same issues. It's an incredibly competitive sector. They've got poor brand salience, and they just need to have bigger share of market. It's the same issues, and on top of that, we've got COVID-19.
Yeah.
So it's another layer.
And of course, you've got to hang something on that. I mean, they talk here about when they had three models which naturally fitted into the SUV category, and they identified that they had the potential to own it because it was very difficult for their competitors to own the category, given the other models that they actually had to support. But I mean, for Suzuki, I don't know what the answer is, quite frankly. I mean, you talk about low awareness. I mean, I like cars and that sort of thing, but I can hardly think of, what models they even have in the market, other than the fact they're small. But that's right.
I think you picked up on the USP immediately there.
Well, that's probably appropriate for busy city traffic, isn't it? And they're probably very economical as well. So there's kind of things that are probably environmentally friendly. There are probably things you can actually work around there.
But they've taken a similar approach to Mitsubishi, in that they're trying to own a category which is fun, and they're trying to connect their brand with a feeling similar to what Mitsubishi were doing. And I wonder if they saw the oncoming success of Mitsubishi and were trying to ride that wave.
Yeah, well, it might. That might be. Look, there are a lot of people have try to put fun in car advertising, but not. But it tends to be for one model, and for a model launch, it's not really a sustainable brand story. And I think that's one of the things I sort of take my hat off to Mitsubishi and their agency for, that say it's entered now in 2020. So this campaign has been running now for 5 years or something like that. Whereas if you look at other people, and the campaigns tend to, there may be bits of continuity, but the campaigns tend to vary and be around one model all the time. And I think the notion that you can build a brand story and try and get a reputation, I think is a really good idea.
But I think, Colin, is with Mitsubishi, if you think about the history of the brand, it has gone global with the reputation around the Pajero as the most reliable, the strongest Dakar rally winner from multiple years, and it's been around rallies for a long time, so it has a really high reputation. I think Mitsubishi as an automobile brand, when started introducing the Mirage and the Lancers, which are crap cars, and you can't really own them, and you just might as well just throw them away because they don't are good for anything. They kind of lost the core of the brand, which was always built on the image of the Pajero. So I guess they realized that, and they said, well, let's go back to the core of the brand, which are the SUVs. That's what Mitsubishi is known for. Yeah. And a lot of car brands kind of lost that, right? So Mazda has so many options. Hyundai has so many options.
Very difficult, yeah.
Nissan has so many options. So no one is actually known for owning the SUV category, which is the fastest growing category in cars. Given that my students are already presented here, so I can kind of give my perception on Suzuki. I think, people say Suzuki is not well placed. I think that's wrong, because Suzuki is number 3 in the compact car category.
Right.
If you think about Swift is the 3rd car in Australia, it might as well be number 1 if they do a good advertising. So I think it's a mistake to think that Suzuki is the 15th car brand, because they are not competing with all categories of cars. They're not competing the SUV car brand, for example. They are a compact car category, and they have to go back to the core brand essence, which is sell compact. Makes no sense to compare Suzuki with a Pajero. They don't have the car for it. They don't have the brand for it.
Well, the Swift is a good car, I think, isn't it, too?
It is an amazing car. It's number 3 in Australia for their category.
And despite the very low awareness of the brand and the low low image of the brand, perhaps. It's still,
Well, yeah, Suzuki as a brand doesn't have awareness, but the Swift, if you actually compare the two brands, Swift and Suzuki, I think people know the name Swift more than they know Suzuki actually.
yes,
Uh,
I think that's right. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, they're certainly not spending as much as Mitsubishi, so I guess that's, well, certainly not at this stage. This is a brand
Yeah.
campaign in the competition.
And I think this was actually a good example, Colin. Thanks for bringing the case up, because
Excellent.
the students are thinking about Suzuki as a media strategy, and for those that are thinking about retail media spending, TV advertising spending, that's, you would expect a 10 times bigger budget, because Suzuki's budget is $2 million.
Yeah, yeah.
The Mitsubishi was 20-30 million dollars, so you kind of see the difference expenditure there. So
Yes, and I can't recall how their media spend might have changed, but I mean, television is certainly diminishing in importance. I mean, and against a brand, I'm not sure who the target audience would be for Swift, but I mean, it's going to be younger people, and probably, probably a fair number of women as part of that. I would think that television is not a particularly effective or cost-efficient way of reaching them. So, but,
Yeah, I think there's a mixture there. Obviously, online, digital with that age group, but there's still.
I suppose writing that idea, Colin, what do you see? Because we were talking earlier before you started your presentation about this idea, like rebranding advertising, particularly in a digital age and in a privacy concerned age. What do you see advertising looking like in the future, or even next year in a COVID normal world?
well, I don't think the purpose of the fundamentals of advertising, I don't think have changed in terms of what you're trying to do, as an arm of marketing. But the connections with customers are very different from what they were 10 years ago. And that, I can't look into the future, but I can assume that the change will continue at the pace that it is now. So using digital channels will become more and more important. I think a lot of money is wasted in some of those. I think social media is not where most of us go to get advertising, and how many people sit there waiting for the opportunity to actually skip ad. It's probably I probably hit that button more often than anything else on the computer. But I think there is certainly those things are changing. The way people purchase changes as well. So therefore, the purchasing chain, and particularly through websites and other kind of commentators and that sort of thing, are much more important now. That's certainly the way. Even as the oldest person in this room, in this virtual room, by a long way, I don't buy things in the same way that I used to. I mean, I buy research with Mr. Google and all the time, and look at things and car reviews and all that kind of stuff before I make a decision. So I think that's that's all important. But that's, to me, it's still all advertising. It just, a lot of it is not paid for in the same way. So using owned or earned media becomes more and more important. And I think it's much more difficult. I mean, I'm being serious, that when I ran an advertising agency many years ago, you could literally, I mean, there were 3 media to use, television, well, 4, television, print, radio, and outdoor. And that was it, so you kind of say that's everything. So if you can work out which one you're going to use, and usually when you brief creative people, they said, can we afford 60-second commercials? I mean, that was the first answer. Life is incredibly more complicated now for marketers, for advertising agencies, for people like you to chart your way through as when you're out in the workforce there. I mean, it is much more complicated, I think, and it's more difficult to earn a buck, but it's still the same sort of the same issues. My son, incidentally, is he's head of strategy for an agency in New York that actually sells Jaguar and Land Rover. So, you know, and he's still doing the same kind of things that a strategy planner would have been doing 20 years ago when I was running an agency. But just the tools at his disposal are certainly quite different. So a lot more of it is about customer journey, and not much of it is about television advertising or anything like that. It's much more downstream or upstream. It's you know, it's but it's changed a lot from that. So. But I think the future is still good, though. I mean, the future is bright. And the great thing about people coming into the business now is they don't come with that history that I might have. People of my generation saying, "Oh God, it's so much harder now." I mean, you were born into this. I'm a digital immigrant. I mean, I can remember the first time I actually got a computer on my desk, and what do I need that for? I remember I had a PA, you know, why do I need a computer? Yeah, and it's so learning the communication techniques of today has been more difficult. But those people that are born into it, then it is the way of the world. And I think the future for people still want to buy things. We still need to market them. We still need to sell them. And we're not going to do that face to face. So the intermediaries of advertising, in its broadest sense, I think will be there for probably as long as all of us are here.
The PA was replaced by the PC.
Absolutely. Well, I soon discovered that when I started my own consulting business from home. There is no PA around. So.
No, look, that's a really interesting case study, Colin, and I think it's really perfect for the students. I guess the only thing that it's not covering is the pandemic, and I guess the FEs next year, probably not, maybe this year or next year, the FEs next year might be the really interesting ones, won't they? In the sense of looking through the pandemic and how that's impacted on.
Yes, I can imagine that we'll have probably some new categories there, like how do you revive a brand that's been destroyed by the pandemic? I mean, that kind of issue that we've never looked at in the past, but I would imagine we'll have some different categories that will be. I think the stories will be quite interesting there. I mean, hopefully they're learnings that we won't have to store away and repeat on future occasions, but they may well. They may well be.
Be a lot of local tourism campaigns.
Well, that's right. You know, I mean, the tourism campaigns will certainly be on, and there'll be a number of categories, I would imagine. Yeah. But it'll be interesting. I mean, so many different categories have been impacted in different ways. I mean, recall how Jerry Harvey was complaining bitterly how the internet and Amazon had destroyed his business. And I look at the fact when I open the Sydney Morning Herald every morning, we now call it the Harvey Norman paper, you know, the daily Harvey Norman, because there are more pages of advertising from him than there is actually news. So he's obviously done extremely well out of it. So some people have been very fortunate, I think, in that. So look at Bunnings, what a success Bunnings has been, because people were stuck at home thinking, "Oh, I should fix that." But for travel and hospitality, and it's been wicked, clearly. Pleasure. Well, if you have any other questions related to that at any other time, feel free to get in touch. It's been nice talking to you.